Disciplined Agile Value Proposition 2024. Today's topic. I am Joshua Barnes, and I'm joined by Scott Ambler, Mark Lines, and Curtis Hibbs. And as we get going today, I do want to just start off with a bit of disclaimer, since we're going to be talking about what we think the value proposition of DA is as we get into this new year, that this is not a PMI sponsored or endorsed event. It's just four DA guys hanging out, sharing some thoughts on things maybe you're not aware of, things maybe you've forgotten, and hopefully some excitement around Disciplined Agile. So our focus, right? We got a couple things that we've sort of chatted about a little bit in advance that we're going to go through today. Some of the team-based training, a lot of really interesting things happening there. Hybrid ways of working, value stream and delivery management. We'll round out with some questions. As we get going, Scott, Mark, Curtis, do you want to share anything before we get into our first topic?
Well, I'll just say that. What will I say? I guess I just want to convey the fact that I'm really excited to try to spread the word about Disciplined Agile and what it can do for people, because I've always, since the beginning, seen it as kind of a godsend to coaches and consultants, because it, the knowledge base of DA just brilliantly curates our past experiences in a way that you can quickly look and find out what we'd forgotten or didn't know in the first place. It's really unique. There isn't anything else like it.
Scott, Mark?
I'll just keep it short so we can get into these topics, because they're very good topics. But at this point in time, I think what I'm seeing out there is a bit of a pushback against Agile, to be quite frank with you. I've talked about peak Agile. I think plateau is probably a better, more appropriate term. I don't think Agile is going away by any stretch, but I think people are a little sick of the hype. Some people think that maybe Agile was a bit of snake oil, a promise to make everything better without taking a disciplined approach. Surprise, surprise, it hasn't been working. And I think actually the time for Disciplined Agile has never been more important, because underneath the covers, and what I think we're going to talk about today, is really the world is realizing that all projects are hybrid projects. There's no pure traditional, there's no pure Agile. Usually everything's in the middle. And that's exactly what DA is, probably actually misnamed. It's actually a hybrid toolkit to help you adapt to any kind of situation, Agile or traditional or something in between. So what I'm saying is, I think that the time has never been, there's never been a bigger need for an understanding of what's in DA, and applying it at a team approach and applying it at an organizational value stream approach. I think we're going to delve into those topics a bit today.
Yeah. I would just add really quick, Mark, that when you commented about maybe it being misnamed slightly, I mean, the DA knowledge base actually contains lots of information from disciplines outside of Agile, including Lean and theory of constraints, illegal rat and all of that. So yeah, I agree with you on all of that.
Yeah, and tradition, what would be normally considered traditional or predictive material too. DA was always about putting things into context and helping you decide which is the best strategy for you in your situation. It was never about being pure Agile or pure Lean, whatever that means. And I think that's been missed. Certainly the name doesn't get it across. And but it happens.
Yeah.
As you say, Scott, it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, you have to take the time period when you guys first created that into account, because Agile was the big marketing word, and if you'd used anything else, you wouldn't have gotten as much attention as you did.
Yeah, without a doubt. But Disciplined Agile definitely benefit from some better marketing.
Speaking of which, let's talk about some team-based training, right? And I thought we could start off today with, for those of you that maybe towards the end of last year, saw some of the live streams that I did, and Curtis and I did some on the DA for Teams workshop. So that's a brand new course, and it's focused on delivering a workshop to a team. And the current sort of starting point, although there'll be others, is for teams that are using a Scrum or Scrum-based approach, and being able to show you how to identify some of the gaps or the challenges, the impediments that you have, and explore using the DA browser options that you can put into an improvement backlog. So Mark, Scott, I mean, prior to PMI's acquisition of Disciplined Agile, where there became a bit more of a focus on individuals and, workshops that were around certifications, and now there's going to be sort of maybe a refocusing of looking at how to support organizations. What do you guys think about the new approach with, team-based training?
Do you want me to kick it off, Scott?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that if you look at PMI's background, it's about specialization of individuals leading projects, that is to say, project managers. And in a traditional project, legacy kind of project, maybe you're building an apartment building or something, you don't really need to train all the construction workers and the electricians and the plumbers on, ways of working. The project, you need to train the project manager so he understands risk management and scheduling and all that kind of jazz. So PMI really has been focused on training those leaders, project managers. I think what PMI has missed is when you get into creative endeavors, agile endeavors, IT endeavors, where there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty and people are generalists or generalizing specialists, as Scott has called them over the years, it really is a team sport. It's no longer just one individual who's responsible for the success of an initiative. So when Scott and I ran a consulting business simultaneously with building out the DA toolkit, we insisted on any client that we worked with that everybody gets trained, including, by the way, executives, and all the way from executives down, middle management, the teams, as well as HR and marketing in some situations, other parts. So I think this is an opportunity that PMI has missed, is focusing so much on project managers and excluding an opportunity to train up the entire teams on ways of working. And I think that PMI recognizes that now. And kind of going back to the roots, kind of going back to what Scott and I did, and going into organizations with kind of like a business to business focus. Let's get everybody trained up. If everybody understands ways of working, you're going to be much more effective in your retrospectives as the team improves its performance over time. So those are my thoughts, Scott.
Yeah, definitely. I think the fundamental thing is people need to hear the same message, and when they're in training, they need to hear from each other. And particularly in the software development world, or just like the virtual world where we're dealing with bits or information. It's so complex, everything's so interweaved with each other. If you don't know what other people are doing and why they're doing it and when they need to do it and how they need to do it, if you don't appreciate that and really have a handle on at least the team picture, you're in serious trouble. It's not, we're not in this world where the manager is handing out tasks and the plumber goes off and plumbs. It's not that in the business world. And so we really need to, so your teams need to understand what they're doing and how they're going to work together and appreciate where each other's coming from and be prepared to learn from each other. And that's what like team-based training is all about. One-off training is not going to get the job done for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to expand on what Scott just said just a little bit, because I think the issues that teams face that they're trying to solve for so that they can get better outcomes for themselves really fall into two categories. The one category is the stuff that they have that's under their control, things that they can change, things that they can do to improve things. But there's a lot of things that are outside of their control. But it's really important for them to be able to identify those things, to escalate them, and to make it known what the cost is for those issues not getting resolved. And I think that the team-based training that we have is actually includes both categories. And I think they're both equally important.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really like about the new team-based training workshop is that it's not based on a bunch of PowerPoint slides. It's not just based on an instructor or a facilitator of a workshop reading a bunch of content. It's really designed for a team to be able to do a very quick assessment. Well, first, understand a bit of what DA is and the value that it's going to bring to you, and then how to do a quick assessment, how to use the DA knowledge base to explore some of the things as a team, right? So we get collective buy-in in discussion, and then be able to leave the workshop with not only an action plan with an improvement backlog, but you get all of the assets. You get a very comprehensive tool that's been built in Miro that is the team's sort of, they have access to that in perpetuity. So, I mean, it's a really, really interesting offering.
Yeah.
I think you make a really good point, Joshua. And I think this is a differentiator of the DA for Teams workshop versus other offerings out there, which are very much genericized, but because they have to sort of be sold to everybody. So they have to be kept generic. And so you leave the training workshop knowing a little about lots of things, but not very much about anything specific. And then you got to go back home and try to figure it out yourself. So this idea of experiential, customized, context-focused or driven training, I think really is a differentiator of the DA workshops.
Yeah. And I just want to point, so, pre-PMI, this is similar to what Mark and I and a few others would deliver at customers as well. We certainly had, the predefined CAN training, but we also had some, extreme tailoring of the workshop to the people in the room on the fly at the time. And those were incredibly valuable to the attendees, and were very popular. People love them when they get, and it was hard for them to imagine how something could be easily tailored, basically on the fly based on the requirements that they had, and get some real value out by the end of the workshop.
Yeah, I'm sure so many of you out there, you've gone through training and it's based off of some canned case study example that is either very, very simplistic or something that is just not relevant to your situation, whether it's the type of work you do, the culture of your environment. And this workshop takes all that into consideration, right? So it is uniquely, positioned, I think, out in the marketplace. We just need for more people to know it actually exists.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'll add to that. Besides the fact that it's designed for an entire team to attend, so that they're working together and they're learning together and they're working on their own issues. I think the other big value prop out of it is the fact that you leave the workshop with an actionable improvement backlog, and a little bit of training on a mechanism for actually executing on that improvement backlog, because that's the part that gets missed often. Is people get a backlog and then they go away and then nothing happens. It just sits there and collects dust. You have to put in place a mechanism to actually work that backlog over time.
All right, so how about we move on to hybrid ways of working? And right, we started off, Mark, with you kind of mentioning a bit around hybrid always being part of DA, and I'll share a little bit of what's been published, but maybe you don't know. Let me share my screen. Yeah, so there is content that has been recently updated on the DA microsite. Actually, let me go ahead and I'll put the link to this in the comments. Hybrid, DA hybrid. How about that? DA hybrid. And the thing that's really, I think, interesting on this when you look through it is that the way that hybrid is depicted here is that it's the spectrum, right? And if we talk about maybe predictive on the left and agile further over to the right, sort of that span in between, right, is what we're calling hybrid. And what the new content on this updated page in DA kind of represents is just a few points along the way, right? And so there could be 100 points in that orange space, 1,000,000 points, an infinite number. And there's just a few points along that kind of depict and give a little context around, is it something that is mostly predictive with a little bit of some of the things we see from an agile way of working, kind of all the way over to where we're, getting more of the benefit of an agile way of working, but we still have a little bit of maybe the traditional or predictive things that we're doing. So with that, let me go ahead and get this back out of the stream, right? So again, I posted the link. It's some great content. I think we'll see as we move into 2024 a bit more, hopefully, of a focus on this, since this is really where most teams, most organizations are at. One thing before Curtis, Mark, or Scott, you guys chime in, I will also mention that what we've been doing in Process Ventures is we've got a workshop where we've been working with organizations to help them design or improve a hybrid approach, a hybrid system, design your way of working, and specifically for hybrids. So I don't have the link readily available, but I'll put a link out there just to give you some context around another workshop that is all about taking a look at these sort of points within that spectrum and how to design or improve your situation.
So one of the things I think is a little bit applicable to this, and unfortunately I don't have the graphic to show, but I've been talking lately about because of this, the fact that nothing is actually pure, and actually agile, it's in and of itself isn't really the goal. It's we've got elements from all these other improvement disciplines. I've been talking a lot, trying to talk a lot recently about better outcomes, about how that's actually the really goal, and what better outcomes are for any particular person or group or team or department or product is very, very context dependent. But there's a lot of things that are in common with trying to find better outcomes, no matter what your situation is. And I think this is particularly true for this hybrid, for teams that are working in a hybrid environment, because if all they ever hear about is the Agile Manifesto, which there's nothing wrong with the Agile Manifesto, it's got a lot of good wisdom in it, but it may not resonate with them in their current hybrid situations. So I kind of like the idea of talking about outcomes instead.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like, so hybrid is just the reality on the ground. I think it's been like that for a long time. And unfortunately, I think the Agile purists have really sort of done themselves a disfavor, and many others a disfavor, by, like conversations along the lines of, well, that's not Agile. We don't do that in Agile. It's like, oh, shut up. Just shut up. Right?
Right.
And like, you do it in Agile. And I, many of you might remember, I used to do a lot of, industry surveys and research to share numbers of what people were actually doing, as opposed to what the Agilists were claiming people were doing. And it was often the difference in night and day. And it was always hybrid stuff, always, going back to, mid-aughts. And I think finally we're starting to recognize that, because the shine has come off Agile finally, and at least the pure Agile stuff. And I get into conversations all the time on LinkedIn where, well, you can't do that in Agile. Well, we've been, or they, somebody's run into some, clever solution, and look what I invented. Well, yeah, we had that in DA since 2012, or yeah, we introduced that in 2009. But yeah, it's really cool. It's a good idea. Good for you. And move on. But anyways, I think it's just because the Agilists have really been prejudiced against more predictive ways of working, in some cases in lean and hybrid stuff in general.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was just going to build on what Scott said, is that traditional project management stuff doesn't just go away because you're doing Agile. And this is the thing that Scott and we've all been talking about for years, is building teams. Any project, you need teams. And there's so many different ways to structure teams. And there's some good ways, and there's some phenomenally bad ways to structure teams. And we have that in the DA toolkit. We can help you make intelligent decisions about how your team should be structured, and recognize the pros and cons of different approaches. And I'll give you one more example. Risk management. You don't learn about risk management in the Scrum course. It doesn't even come up in the dialogue. But I would suggest to you that any project needs to understand what the risks are. We need to identify them. We need to prioritize them. We need to mitigate them. And there are many ways of doing that. There are many ways, different techniques for doing risk management. There's lightweight techniques. Like I like to put my risks up on a whiteboard when I'm co-located, and very lightweight. Some people want to use an Excel spreadsheet. Some people want to use a more formal. If you're in a life-dependent software endeavor, then you're probably going to want to take a little bit more formal approach to risk management. So, and you can still be agile. So these are the kinds of, and we just think this is just basic adult behavior. Unfortunately, you don't learn about that in a traditional agile course, but certainly it's all these kinds of things are part and parcel of the DA toolkit.
Yeah,
of a hybrid approach.
Yeah.
People get stuck in just applying what they know and what their past experience is. And a lot of people, they're just completely unaware of other proven techniques that have been used successfully that might even be more appropriate. And it's human nature, but you can't know everything, right? So people are going to apply things based on what they know. But if they have access to something like the DA toolkit, the DA knowledge base, now they have a way to get exposed to things that they don't know and things that might work better for them. And I think that's the huge win with DA.
Yep. All right. How about value stream management? Yeah. So, there's been great value stream management content in DA, obviously, for years and years now. There's the DA VSC course. And one of the things that I've seen with delivering that course many times now is that I'm getting more people that are not consultants, more people that are in they're a project professional, they're a program or portfolio manager, right, working for an organization versus being an external consultant coming in to support them, to understand more about how to improve the flow of value delivery. So that's something that, again, just kind of raising awareness, reminding people of the good content, the opportunities for being able to really understand how to make some improvements in the flow of delivering value.
Well, I was going to put the value stream management kind of into a larger context, just to level set, because in my mind anyway, I like to divide up the agility principles, practices, topics, whatever you want to talk about, into three kind of overlapping categories. You've got all the team level stuff, team level agility that's gotten most of the attention over the years because that's where Agile came from. Then you've got the value stream category, which is talking more about end to end and how the upstream stuff affects the team and the downstream, and they affect downstream pieces of the value stream, that sort of thing. And the skills and knowledge needed to effectively work on better outcomes in the value stream layer are different than they are in the team layer. So it's important to recognize that. But there's even a third one, which is basically the leadership or executive layer, right? They play in a real important role into achieving agility or better outcomes. But the skills that they need and the principles they need maybe the principles tend to be the same, but the practices and the things they need to consider are different from what the people that are working in the value stream layer or on the team layer are doing. So I don't think there's a lot of recognition of that, at least not explicitly. I think there's a lot of people working in these different areas, but I don't think they delineate it really clearly. But I think, value stream is like the critical, next area to focus on after team agility, because that end to end is so important to the flow of value to the customers. But I actually think that the real trend for business agility that's coming up in the future is going to be at the leadership level.
I agree with you, Curtis, 100%. Of course, Now, so I talked about earlier, and we've all talked about how PMI has kind of missed a huge opportunity here to recognize that the entire team needs upskilling and build the course that we now have to address that market, because it's huge, of course. But the other one is like you say, Curtis, value stream management. If you look at what's happened in the past, and one of the reasons that Agile started to really kind of leave a sour taste in people's mouth is if you take a look at something like SAFe. SAFe is often implemented on top of a bad system, right? There's people, they just don't have the courage, the political will to redesign the organization before putting in an Agile framework and that's what we talk about in value streams, is that, you know, slapping a SAFe on top of a bad system, you're just in for a lot of grief. In fact, if you look at the SAFe training, they talk about managing your dependencies with these strings between the different dependencies and things. What a horrible nightmare that can be. Wherein, if you had the courage to actually redesign around value streams, your dependencies would go down dramatically, and you wouldn't need that big string diagram to manage the dependencies so much. So this is what value streams is. And I like what Curtis says, it starts at the executive level. You need to let them know what value streams are. You need to back the value streams. You need to create a backlog of improvements to those value streams. And it's the executives that will have the authority and the funding, etc., the political will to actually create those value streams that at the end of the day will allow you to deliver more value to your customers more frequently. And that, if you don't do that, if you don't address the value streams, then you're just doing local optimization. You're not optimizing the system, and you're never going to be successful. And then eventually your Agile initiative transformation, it will fail.
Yeah. And I think, and it's interesting, like, you know, if you take a look at the value stream material in DA, it's really solid stuff. And, you know, Curtis mentioned the DA VSC earlier, all great stuff. And I think, you know, in many ways, this is the future for organizations. You know, these organizations, you have one or more value streams. That's how you make your money. Whether or not you recognize that and whether or not it's effective, those are very different stories. So it's not really like reinventing the wheel. It's more of a, you know, DA helps you understand, here's what's actually going on, and here are rooms, you know, here are places where you probably need to improve, and everybody's different, of course. And then, you know, it gives you options that you could, you know, apply intelligently. And I think, you know, value streams, or more accurately, probably value delivery, really is the future for many organizations and the management profession in general. You know, if you take a look at what's happening in the project management office space, they're all, you know, in many cases, they're moving to become either value management offices, and there's some great ideas and some great material out there, or value delivery offices. And you can argue back and forth about the nuances of those two terms, and you know, angels dancing on heads of pins, basically. But it's all about value. It's not as much about projects, because when you look at how your organization actually operates, you have some projects, which is great, but you also have a lot of operational stuff. You have value streams, you have many other things, and you know, you need to govern and guide and lead all of that, not just projects. So you want to have a better, like a greater vision, or a more embracing vision than, you know, a traditional PMO. Now, you know, having said that, there's some organizations that really are just project organizations, you know, the consulting firms, perhaps, or, you know, construction firms. And yeah, it's all about projects plus a little bit of extra stuff. So yeah, have a PMO. But, you know, for most organizations, you really need a VMO or a VDO when it gets down to it. And DA is well situated to explain that and to help you actually understand what's really going on, and once again, to tweak it and improve upon what you're doing, which is what it's really all about, getting better incomes, as Curtis was saying.
Yeah, and I will say the DAVSC, the DAVSC course, wonderful course, great workshop. It is 3 days, right? And there's a lot of content in it. One of the things that we've been doing for a while now, that's kind of in alignment with what is in the DAVSC, as well as other things that are out in the industry, some of the work that the Value Stream Management Consortium has been doing, is we do have a 1-day workshop for value stream management that is specifically designed for leadership and I'll say again, project professionals. It's the project managers, the program managers, portfolio managers. I occasionally do deliver this in an open enrollment, right, a public setting, but it's also, and originally it was designed for delivery, again, almost like from a team perspective. So within your organization, getting together the people that are going to need to be part of making changes, identifying improvements from a value stream perspective. This workshop is specifically designed for that, and it is all example based. Again, no PowerPoint slides. It's all about showing examples that then we can have discussions around how does it apply, or how would that be applicable to your situation. And for private deliveries, as Scott had mentioned, it's very easily to be configured for your situation. So anyway, there's a link that I put into the chat. But yeah, if anyone out there is interested, again, if you're somebody in a leadership position or one of these other roles, yeah, another great option.
I'd like to point out a slight a piece of well, I guess this applies to everything, not just value stream management, but I think it's an overlooked piece of what Disciplined Agile advocates, which is to basically, as you're making changes to improve your outcomes, your structure, whatever you're trying to improve, to minimize the risk of doing that by starting where you are and making changes incrementally, right? Which is what Lean has always advocated, and that's the position that DA has as well. It's not necessary to do these big bang changes. I mean, sometimes if you can, and sometimes it is, but it's a big risk. And I think that's where some of this sour taste that you've been talking about, Mark, comes from, is companies doing these big bang changes and then throwing a lot of money into it and not getting very much out of it.
Yeah, and I agree with Curtis. I just want to. I think one of the challenges is coming from the consulting companies, where see these one of the reasons why I think so many people got pushed to do big bang changes is because the consultants that they were being sold only had the background to do one framework. I'm a Scrum consultant, I'm a SAFe consultant, I'm a LESS consultant. So yeah, my Scrum hammer tells me we need to do a big bang Scrum installation here. And then so they'd get taken for a ride. And maybe it worked, maybe it didn't, who knows. Often didn't, looking at like the 80% failure rate of Agile transformations. And whereas a transformation where you start where you are requires hybrid, a knowledge of hybrid techniques, requires a knowledge much greater than the range, much greater than the range of even just one or two frameworks. And this is once again where the DA toolkit came into play, right? It never limited itself to one toolkit or one framework like Scrum or SAFe or whatever, because the world isn't that simple. It really isn't. So I think I would invite organizations to actually step back and look at the situation that they're in, assess reality, and then ask yourself, are any of these narrow frameworks going to get the job done? And the answer is, in the vast majority of cases, is no. You're going to need a hybrid approach. So start with something that, like the DA toolkit, that actually embraces this idea of hybrid. I don't think you're going to have time, but I will share my rant anyways. If you remember back at the beginning of COVID, just remember like the month before COVID, if you can think back in the distant past, the Agile purists, 90% of them were saying, you can't do Agile remotely. Can't be done. It's evil, bad. You're worshiping Satan. They had all these stories where you couldn't do remote Agile, regardless of the actual data of people doing remote Agile. But the purists were telling you it couldn't be done. In DA, we never made that mistake. That was built in amongst other scaling, factors. Distributed workers and hybrid distributed workers were built right in from the very beginning, because that's the reality on the ground. And then it was interesting, like along comes COVID, and then by March 2020, and certainly by April of 2020. All those purists were suddenly telling you, oh, yes, we can do remote Agile. I'm an expert at it. This is awesome. We can do it. No problem at all. Right. And if you can think back that long, everybody on this call probably observed that. And I think, and the reason why I'm saying this is that you see the exact same thing with a myriad of other issues in Agile. Well, Agile doesn't do this. We don't do any stinking planning up front because that's evil. Well, if they had something smack them upside the head suddenly, they'd very quickly, like COVID, they would very clearly be so, oh yes, we need to do planning. How about that? I'm an expert at it. Come on. Come on.
Yeah.
This is one of the most important DA principles. Be pragmatic.
Yeah.
Yep. And use an evolutionary approach. So getting back to value streams, I think that PMI risks losing out on a huge opportunity here. Having been Scott and I both past members of the executive team, we know that PMI is looking for ways to help PMs remain relevant and indeed increase their career prospects and get a seat at the leadership table. In the past, project managers often are given an initiative when it's already been decided what needs to be done, by when it needs to be done, how much money it's going to take, given to a project manager, and then they're expected to execute. If they had been at the leadership table, maybe they would have suggested maybe a different approach might make sense. They might be looking at value streams, different ways of working. So as Scott said, value delivery offices, value management offices is a huge opportunity that PMI really needs to figure out. We have to go beyond PMOs, and that's exactly what these value management offerings we're talking about here do. And I believe that it's just a matter of time before executives figure out how important this is, that we need to go beyond PMOs, and then they're going to be out there looking hard for people who understand what it means to take a systems approach rather than a project approach, a product approach. And there's not enough people out there that understand what value streams are and how to optimize those value streams. So here's an opportunity for everybody on this call to get ahead of the curve, to build your skills, get it on your LinkedIn profile, because sooner or later executives are going to figure out, like, if I'm running a company, I want those people. I don't want one of these big consulting firms coming in to say you need to do SAFE or whatever their specialty is, as Scott says. I want them to analyze my situation, and help me figure out how to get value to the customer quicker, and happier customers. That's what I'm looking for, and that's what you learn about in these offerings. So,
I guess I can use that as a plug, another plug for the DAVSC class, because one of the important things that it introduces is an actual mechanism, an actual workshop approach for actually identifying those kinds of issues and creating that action plan going forward. It's very unique, and I haven't seen anything like it out in the industry.
Yeah, and I would invite people, and particularly if you're in the IT space, I would invite you to observe what's going on. In the last 5 some odd years, there's been a very clear project to product movement, where project teams are, they've pretty much figured out that the concept of a project is not really appropriate for software development, just because of the nature of the life cycle and that sort of stuff. And so there's been a very clear movement to treating software-based products, which is a heck of a lot of work, as products, not as projects. And this is another reason why, what got me going on this was that the PMO concept is really going to struggle in an IT organization where they've moved away from projects for the most part. They're looking for something more. They're looking for VMOs or BDOs, as we said before. And so just observe. Please choose to observe that, because I've been in interesting conversations along those lines with other people, and they've questioned the concept of PMOs for IT organizations. It's good for other organizations, don't get me wrong, but too limiting for the IT space.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest opportunities for project professionals is the value delivery management, the value delivery manager type of role and mindset. So much opportunity there.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. Like, being a project manager is a great entryway into corporate America, or whatever country you're in. But after 5 or 6 years, some people, and you might want to be a project manager for life because it's awesome, good for you. But after 5 or 6 years, you might want to progress to something more, like being a value delivery manager, or whatever that title ends up being. And I think that fair enough, or moving up into the executive ranks, or wherever is your want to head your career. And I think this is a great path. Becoming a value manager or value delivery manager or value stream manager is a very good career path for existing PMs.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain amount of agile fatigue, right? That's been growing over the years, but there are still new agile transformations that are beginning. There's probably one that's beginning, or lots that are probably beginning right now in the month of January, right? And a lot of times what happens, right, is there's a question around PMOs, there's a question around other project managers and agile, right? And a lot of myths and understandings out there. So this is just another way to again continue to be relevant, continue to add tremendous value. Curtis, it looks like you're
yeah, I know. I mean, so this is where the genius of the term agile came in, but it's also its own downfall, is the fact that it's so ambiguous that you can interpret it to mean whatever you want. It's both an asset and whatever the opposite of an asset is. So I think there's a lot of conflation that's happened over the years as we've moved from team level agile to value stream and business agility. There's been a lot of conflation between agile as a set of team level practices that we started with, and agility as something that businesses are looking for, right? They're not exactly the same. There's a lot of overlap and they support each other, but they're actually completely different concepts.
Yeah.
Your comment, I see we're going to get to questions, Josh, but I just want to finish a little bit here, is that your comment about transformations getting kicked off even now. Well, what I'm seeing is it's not their first attempt. It's their second or third or fourth attempt at a transformation. Right. That's what's going on. Pretty much everybody's tried it at least once. But why isn't it successful? Why isn't it sustainable? Why is it falling apart? It's because they haven't done it properly. They haven't used a disciplined approach. They haven't evolved to where they need to be. I can think about an insurance company that was one of our customers in British Columbia that to this day, we went through a transformation about 6-7 years ago, but we completely redesigned their teams. We redesigned their compensation systems. It was a union shop, by the way, and they've never been happier to this day because we had the courage to educate executives, managements on the hard decisions that need to be made. We made the changes. We evolved to where they needed to be, and it ended up being a sustainable transformation versus what we see out there, where people are just putting band-aids on top of bad systems.
I'd really like to add to what Mark said before you go to questions, because I think there is some judgments that need to be made about risk levels, because in some cases they're like what you talked about with like compensation systems and things like that. Those are big changes, but those are also the kind of changes that kind of have to be big changes. It's hard to do something like that small and incrementally. And so there's this trade-off between, do I want to do small incremental changes to minimize the risk, or am I ready to take the plunge on some bigger things? And there's a balance point in there, and it's a real judgment call. It's to where that balance point lives, very context dependent. But I'm just raising that as an issue because people need to think about that.
Yeah. All right. So I think there haven't been too many questions. If you have any, put them in the chat. Some we may or may not be able to answer. Right. So, and here's one. Yeah. The DA browser, right, has we're still at version 5.8. Any plan to publish a new version soon? Now, remember, this is not an official PMI live stream. Curtis, I don't know if there's anything that is non-official that you want to possibly share on this.
I can only share general stuff. I can't answer that question directly. I will say that we always have plans going forward, but the execution of those plans kind of depend on a lot of things. I would say that for the last year, we've spent more time updating content in the web-based knowledge base more so than the browser itself. So the browser itself contains pointers into the web, and there's like expanded versions of topics and things like that. And I think there's been more effort spent in that area over the last year than in the browser. Obviously, that needs to change because we need to have updates in both areas.
Oops, that's not what I wanted to show. This is what I wanted to show. Any attempt to make the wrong thing right makes it wronger. Better doing the right thing wrong than the wrong thing right. Sounds like it's from Russ Akoff.
Yeah, so I'll take that because this is very similar to a point that I've been making for years, is that you could be doing the wrong thing for your situation, and I want to be clear about that: the wrong thing for your situation, and not realize it, or you think you're doing the right thing, right? I know this is the official best practice, so we're going to follow it whether it makes sense or not. And what happens is then the people who are having this vision forced upon them want to push back and say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, that's an interesting technique, but here are the trade-offs. And here's this list of disadvantages that are very clearly spelled out in the DA toolkit. And look, we're experiencing all of them. How about that? What a coinkydink. And look, here are other techniques that appear to be better than what our best practice. Maybe we should experiment with those and see if they work for us in our situation. And so you can break this log jam of we can't do things, we don't do things like that here, that sort of logic, or this is the best way of doing things because I got trained in this 30 years ago. You can get away from that, and you can start having intelligent conversations about your options. But you got to know what your options are, and you got to know what your trade-offs are, right? And and if you're a one-hit wonder that only knows one framework, you've got no hope of having those conversations.
Oh yeah, I touched a nerve, Scott. One of the things I've been talking about recently is how do coaches keep their jobs these days? You got Spotify, and I think I heard one of the big banks has just decided, Fidelity, I think, has just decided to release all their coaches. They are not renewing contracts for Agile coaches anymore. And I'm not surprised. I've run into so many coaches who really don't understand different ways of working. They have been trained that to be a coach, they need to be specialist in conflict management, help the team get along, and help the team figure out things for themselves. I think that's a bit of a cop-out. I want a coach that's been there, done it many different ways, and can recognize bad patterns, good patterns, and then help the team move in the right direction. So we talked about risk management. I've known coaches that don't even understand what risk management is. So guess what? Bad things happen, projects fail, coach gets thrown out.
or think risk management's a swear word. It's not Agile.
Right. Well, even experienced coaches who actually are good at some of the things you just mentioned, Mark, can't know everything, no. and that's where the DA knowledge base comes in.
Yeah. So I'll answer this question quickly because I already put something out. Yeah. So for anybody that is interested in the DA VSC being run 3 consecutive days, a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday across the weekend. Yeah, either post on, LinkedIn, send me a message, send me some dates that might work over the next month or two. I'd be quite happy to get something set up so that it's more accommodating to other schedules. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's actually quite common for that class to be delivered in a series of half days instead of full days. That happens quite a bit. Yeah,
I do that pretty frequently where I'll do 5 half days. But again, based on calendars, a 3-day delivery across, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, happy to do that. Do you see incorporating design processes around human behavior in the future? Any takers on this question?
I think that should always be true, and I think it should be true now. I don't know why that's a future thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of considerations when you're trying to decide, how to resolve any particular issue that you might be having as a team, or as a value stream. But human behavior has always got to be part of that. It doesn't matter how good your decision is, if it's something that people are going to reject or not buy into or feel threatened by, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah, it's part of your context, right? It's
Yeah.
this is my team. These are the people we're interacting with, or should be interacting with, or are interacting with us. Depending on how you want to look at that. But and yeah, it's all about human behavior. Like, so if you don't understand how people are behaving, or could potentially behave, given a change, then you're. I don't know how you'd make good decisions.
Yeah, and I'd mention the we have a design your way of working workshop. One of the versions of it is specifically on hybrid, but that is a big part of it. It's how the team interacts. It's on human behavior. It's on the culture of the organization, on the culture of the team within that part of the organization, and the type of or the people they're regularly interacting with, whether it's stakeholders, people from shared services, or what have you. So yeah, we have quite a bit of a focus on that because you guys said, not going to be very successful otherwise.
And it's also certainly a big part of the Disciplined Agile Coach workshop from PMI as well. We haven't mentioned that at all. Maybe we should, our bad. But
that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a very important piece.
I want to plug that workshop, even though I'm not involved with it at all. That is probably the best coaching workshop, for at least for Agile consultants or improvement consultants, that I've ever seen, because it goes way beyond the team, and it focuses on interactions between teams, like disparate teams, and how do you resolve all these very serious problems that frankly hang up most of the purists. If you look at the discussions on the web, it's all, well, I'm in this situation, these guys are trying to do this, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you should know how
as long as we're
coaching, you should know how to overcome that.
As long as we're plugging the DA coach thing, I'll also mention that it was purposely designed to not be software centric. Yes. It's the whole class is taught using a case study that has nothing to do with software.
Yeah, I'm going to take credit for that. I remember being a real hard ass on that issue. Thou shalt not have any software examples in that workshop.
Yep. Good job, Scott.
Yeah.
I policed that.
All right, let me give one quick look, make sure we didn't miss any questions. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Yeah, so I would say, 2024, like any other year we could be starting in. If you don't have a lot of knowledge or experience with DA, consider it. Start looking into it. Scott,
did you post a link to the DA browser?
Yeah, I did.
You did? Okay, cool. Yeah. Because I would just encourage people who are unfamiliar with DA to go out there and take a look at it. See what kind of knowledge is in there, and see how, for a particular area, seeing the trade-offs between the practices when it's a good idea to use one practice over another. That's invaluable information.
Yeah, and if you've got an Agile coach, or you are an Agile coach, and say, you don't need it. We knew all that. I know all that. I don't know. There's almost 2,000 practices that are described in the knowledge base, plus lots of other stuff. I don't know anybody who's got that power of recall, right? So if somebody's telling you, you don't need that, look at it. Just take a few minutes and look at it on your own, and make your own conclusions.
Guess what? I don't have the toolkit memorized either. No. We created it, but there's so much stuff in there. Sometimes I have to go in to say, what were the different ways of forming teams or whatever. And by the way, the toolkit I have found has been an invaluable tool for coaches. Yeah. I've taken form teams. Let's use that example. Circled all the choices that this management team had made regarding forming their teams, and if you know the toolkit, they're ranked in terms of good ideas, not so good ideas. They were all at the bottom of the list, and it was like an eye opener for this executive. Said, "OMG, we have to redesign our teams. Yeah. so it's an amazing tool to help, raise awareness of where the team, the organization needs to change. So
Yeah. And like
it's a
other
great
tools,
resource.
it's free, right? Go to the link that I posted. You don't need an account. You don't need a membership. You don't need to pay. It's not behind a paywall, right? It's free.
Free's good.
Free's good. All right. So once again, Scott, Mark, Curtis, thank you a lot for joining today. Thank you all in attendance. If you're out there live or if you are watching this on replay, any follow-on questions, post them on LinkedIn. We'll do our best to address them as best we can. And for each of the three of you, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say, I believe all four of us are probably available to speak at PMI chapters and other user groups.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put any words in anybody's mouth, but I think that's the case for all four of us.
Yeah.
Yes,
So reach out.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next live stream.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.